Manubac, a science teacher from Puertas National High School, Division of Lanao del Sur 2. The learning experience in this video will revolve around the concepts of the basic unit of life, which is the cell. The learning objectives of this lesson is to enumerate and explain the postulate of the cell theory. Now, let us recall that atom is the smallest unit of a matter. Do you still remember what matter is? Very good. Matter is anything that has a mass and occupies a space. Can you give me an example of a matter? Alright. An example of a matter could be a chair or a cat. Now, what's the difference between the chair and the cat? Alright, the chair is non-living while the cat is a living thing. An unorganized unit of a matter is classified as non-living, while the organized unit of a matter is classified as living. All living things are composed of a functional unit known as the cell. Within each cell are little organs that has a specific function or task known as the organelles. This is the cell. And every organism started with a single cell, mutated for over 1 billion years, and resulted into a different species. You may be wondering, why do we need to study cell? And what's so important about them anyway? Well, studying cell will help us to understand how organisms function and how do they multiply and many more. Now, let's talk about the widely accepted postulates of life, the cell theory. The cell theory is a unifying concept in biology which answers 3 important questions. Number 1, what living things are made of? Second, what cells can do? Third, where do cells come from? These 3 questions generally answered by the 3 postulates. The postulate 1 states that cell is the basic unit of life. Second, all living organisms are made of 1 or more cells, regardless of its size, form, and complexities. For example, this is a microscopic view of an amoeba. Amoeba is an organism that has only 1 cell, classified as unicellular, while these pictures are examples of organisms that has more than 1 cell, classified as multicellular. The third postulate of the cell theory states that cells come from pre-existing cells. For example, this video shows the cell division. It is the cell division in somatic cells. As you can see that 1 cell divides to form 1 or more cells. In order for you to understand more about the concepts of the cell theory, you need to know first how did they came up with this theory. Discovering the cell was made possible when the Jensen brothers started experimenting on their lenses sometime during the 1590s, and they were able to develop the first compound microscope, which has a maximum magnification of 30. As recorded, this compound microscope looks like this. And this compound microscope is capable of viewing small organisms. And this innovation paved way to the microscope technology and became an important tool to the scientists in order for them to visualize and describe what they are trying to study. And the search about life continued. On 1665, an English scientist, Robert Hooke, used a microscope to study a cork. He mounted a dead cork out of the bark of a maple tree. After such, he saw this image. He compared these images into a small rooms in a monastery, and then he coined the term cell. Not so later in 16th century, a Dutch scientist named Anton van Leeuwenhoek invented a more advanced compound microscope. And this compound microscope has a maximum magnification of 300. After his invention, he mounted several specimens, both living and non-living matter. After such, he discovered a microorganism on a rainwater, which he called animalcules. We call these animalcules in modern biology as protozoa. He also discovered red blood cells and the first to study sperm cells in animals. Next in line is Francisco Redi. He disproved the spontaneous generation theory. This theory is widely accepted way back then. Spontaneous generation theory states that life comes from non-life. For example, a rat comes from a sewage or a garbage. In Redi's red meat experiment, he placed a raw meat on 3 jars. The first jar is tightly sealed, the second jar is uncovered, while the third jar is covered with a cloth net. Results show that maggots come from the hatched eggs of the flies from the raw meat. Thus, it leads to the discovery of Francisco Redi that life comes from life, or the theory of biogenesis. Theodor Schwann is a German zoologist who conceptualized that all animals are composed of cells, thus making it the basic unit of life. Another German botanist named Matthias Schleiden, he also conceptualized that all plants are composed of cells. These 2 German scientists contributed a big chunk in the formulation of the first and the second postulates of the cell theory. Rudolf Virchow is a German physician. He was the scientist behind the third postulate of the cell theory. It states that cell divides to form a new cell. Another remarkable scientist associated with the formulation of the cell theory is Louis Pasteur. He is a French chemist. He is known for his pasteurization. It is a process of sterilizing a product. It could be a milk or a wine, so that it won't get spoiled and it could be preserved for a long period of time. In Louis Pasteur's experiment, he put a broth on a special S-shaped flask. The special shape of this flask is intended to trap dust particles that contains bacteria. He boiled the broth and put it on several locations. One flask broke its stem. It became cloudy and microbes were found on the broth, while there were no microbes on the other flask. This experiment proved that microbes only comes from another microbe, thus supporting the idea of Rudolf Virchow that cell comes from another cell. And now, let's have a short review. Question number 1. Who invented the first compound microscope? Very good. He is Zacharias Janssen. Question number 2. Who coined the term cell? Alright, he is Robert Hooke. Question number 3. Who invented or who created a more advanced compound microscope and was able to view protozoa? Alright, very good. He is Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Question number 4. Who are the German scientists who conceptualized that all animal and plants are composed of cells? Alright, very good. They are Matthias Schleiden and Theodor Schwann. Question number 5. Who is the scientist stated that cells comes from a dividing cells? Alright, very good. He is Rudolf Virchow. Question number 6. Who is the scientist who performed an experiment by boiling a broth using the S-shaped flask? Okay, very good. He is Louis Pasteur. And now, let's enumerate the 3 postulates of the cell theory. 1. Cell is the basic unit of life. 2nd, all living things are made up of 1 or more cells. 3rd, cells come from pre-existing cells. This marks the end of this video. Thank you for watching.